Each day, more and more people are listening to music on Spotify, and that's also true for podcasts. Next time you're on the Spotify app, make sure to follow Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond. Enjoy listening to Lou, his incredible guests, and all of the amazing episodes. Listen, follow, and share. Thrive Loud on Spotify.
So here's how it works. You take the blue pill, the story ends, you wake up in your bed, and you believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you listen to Thrive Loud, and Lou shows you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Get ready to Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond.
Hey, Thrive Loud listeners, Lou Diamond here. I hope you're doing amazing. We had a bang week here on Thrive Loud. Earlier in the week, we had an episode that was the Thrive Loud Live airing with my conversation with Doug Sandler, podcasts Millions and Mustangs. So many plugs and people name dropped in that particular episode. It's worth going back and listening. But that's just Doug. But it was really good. Great conversation. We had a lot of fun, and it was fun doing it live. So if you missed it, listen to this episode. You'll really appreciate it. And then I had a great conversation with Peter Brandel. Peter is from Germany. His story about what happened during COVID-19, how he was literally separated from his wife because of the travel restrictions around the globe, and how he put together a global event with all these motivational people, which I was fortunate enough to be a part of, called We Will Thrive. We named the episode We Will Thrive Loud, and Peter was very supportive of that. Enjoy this particular episode pulled from Bedside Readings, Authors That Thrive, with Derik Cavignano. Great guy, really great author. I could see this book becoming a movie. So my fingers are crisscrossed for you, Derik, because I thought the concept was amazing and kind of dark, and I'm not so sure I want to hang out with you in a dark room. But hey, you'll enjoy this episode, listeners. It's really great. Here he is, Derik Cavignano, here on Thrive Loud.
Welcome to Bedside Readings, Authors That Thrive, a podcast show that provides you exclusive access to top writers around the globe and how they are thriving through their writing, their passions, and their lives. Here's your host, Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to Bedside Readings, Authors That Thrive, connecting you to amazing authors that are thriving through their work and in their lives each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond. Today, we have a Boston native and award-winning writer. He writes character-driven thrillers in a variety of genres, including horror, sci-fi, and crime. His novels include The Righteous and the Wicked and Colony of the Lost, and his newest crime thriller, The Art of Dying. Coming to us from Florida with an angry cat who won't stop biting him, Derik Cavignano. Derik, how are you today?
I'm great, Lou. Thanks for having me.
So, Derik, Boston native, now living in Florida. Do you miss it?
Not really in the winters. I love the city. You know, it's a great city, great people. I do miss spring and fall a little bit, but that's about it. Never look back.
Understood. But I would also imagine that Boston's rich story is actually what inspired your latest novel, The Art of Dying. Can you share that with our listeners?
Sure. The Art of Dying is a crime thriller. It's sort of a serial killer mob mashup that some critics have sort of described as a cross between The Silence of the Lambs and The Departed. And, the city plays a pretty integral role in there. A lot of different parts of the city are featured, especially sort of the North End in terms of the, Italian crime bosses, and South Boston for the Irish mob. And, it's sort of, some of those characters are inspired by the mobsters that, sort of grew, I grew up during the reign of Whitey Bulger and Gennaro and Giulio, and sort of that's sort of the inspiration for, some of the mobster characters in the book.
Derik, it's interesting because I've got all these visuals from all the movies, whether it's The Departed, The Town. I'm thinking of all the different, features of Boston and crime. When you're writing, I guess, and specifically in today's era where we have so many other screenplays and whatnot that can influence us, and you have your own Boston experience, how do you kind of divvy up and bifurcate all of that to get your story to come to life?
Yeah, I think, my story sort of, came about where the righteous and the wicked, the protagonist in that story, it's sort of a sci-fi suspense thriller. And, the protagonist's brother was a Boston cop. And he ended up being sort of a larger than life character. And, so I decided he needed to have his own book that would be a crime thriller about, some of the cases that he was on. And, so naturally, I wanted it to be a big case. I wanted it to be sort of interesting. And, with Boston, the whole mafia undertones from like the 80s and early 90s, I wanted to kind of deal with that a little bit. And then I also had some ideas about, a serial killer. And it wasn't until I sort of realized that, well, maybe they're part of the same book, that the idea for this book came together. Sort of the tagline for the book is, when the bizarre death of a mob foot soldier sparks an escalating war between Boston's Irish and Italian mafia, one detective's relentless search for the truth uncovers evidence of a serial killer obsessed with the art of human suffering. So it's sort of really the intersection of those two worlds. And so I think that's what makes it a little bit unique, because it's a blend of the two.
Derik, horror, crime syndicates, murder, death. How is this, I guess, your superpower and topic of writing? What was this something that always fascinated you when you were younger, or it's always just been it's some deep part of you? I'm not saying you're one of those things, but what brings this as the topic that you love to write about?
I don't know. I mean, I think, from a horror perspective, and this book really is kind of a blend of kind of crime thriller and horror, something a little bit kind of in the vein of Thomas Harris, maybe. But I think with horror, it really taps into our most primal emotions, and, sort of just the fear and what that does to people. And I think when people are sort of, have to face up to their fears, that's when we're tested the most. And I just, find that to be a really sort of interesting thing to write about.
I love asking writers this question as it relates to the writing process. There are some people who are very disciplined and have a set time each day, and that's when they do their writing. Or there are other people who just, do something creative, go on a walk, and the idea hits them, and then they put pen to paper, so to speak. What's your writing process like, and how these ideas come to you? Is it all at one piece, in process, in chunk? Share with the listeners how you pull things together.
Sure. For me, it normally starts a little bit like I described a moment ago about it's always the intersection of ideas, because for a long time I had an idea about a serial killer who was, an artist and sort of displayed his victims, essentially, hangs them on the wall and keeps them alive, and they're living art, right? So that was an idea I had for a number of years, and just didn't know where to go with it. And then, as I was thinking about this book and, wanting to have Detective Ray Hanley, maybe deal with this serial killer, it didn't seem to have enough ammunition on its own until I sort of introduced the intersection with, the mob bosses and the crime families, and how that's intertwined.
Got it.
So, and then I've had other stories. I have another story called Colony of the Lost, where it was really just imagery. So I wanted to write a monster in the woods story. I wanted to write a ghost story. I had some other ideas in my head of, different things. And it wasn't until I realized, maybe those things were combined that it sort of comes together. So for me, that's kind of how it works. I have had, on rare occasions, I've had a dream where, I've come up with some interesting ideas. So I've got, a notebook filled with things like that as well, that I haven't actually started writing yet. But I'd say 99 times out of 100, dreams kind of fizzle out. By the time you write it on paper, you sort of go, that doesn't sound good at all.
But I want to dive into the actual process. Is it a discipline, like you sit down to write a certain amount of time, or it's as the ideas hit you?
I think it's as the ideas hit me. I do try to be disciplined in the sense that I want to write, whenever I can. But I've got, a full-time job and family and all that stuff. So it does get tricky to find time to write. And I'm definitely not a morning person. So, I'll end up writing, maybe for a half hour or an hour, at night, or, on the weekends, find a few hours to write. And, I'll kind of keep that regimen just to kind of keep things going and the ideas flowing. And, once I get really into a book, I start finding more and more time to really carve out and sort of plow through it.
Derik, I love asking guests on this show, this program, this question, and that is that we all have, positive days, great days where everything's flowing, and days where they're a little bit harder. When you have trouble thriving, who or what practice do you seek to get yourself back on the thriving track?
I think it's, sometimes a little bit, especially if it's like writer's block, a little bit of distance is sort of helpful, to go for a walk or just to do other things. Strangely, I find a lot of ideas come to me in the shower, or just drifting off to sleep, keeping a notebook by the bedside for that purpose. But a lot of times it's just, sitting in front of the screen and just plowing through it. And, when you're sort of in the zone, it's sort of like a window opens in your mind and you start seeing things unfold, and you're really just trying to transcribe it. And I think that's the time when, things really start to fly from your fingers. And, you look up suddenly and you realize you've been writing for 2 hours and you didn't even know it. That's sort of where the magic happens, but, it's sometimes difficult to get to that spot.
Derik, I'm curious about this question because of the things that you write about, and have it certainly are in some cases brutal to connect with. How does your wife react to some of your finished products when it's out there, when she reads the content that you've created?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is, I do try to keep, obviously with the topic of like a serial killer, I do try to keep a lot of the gore, off stage to the extent that I can. But this is definitely probably the darkest and maybe goriest thing I've written to date, with The Art of Dying. So, I think initially my wife, didn't want to read the book. And I was like, okay, well, you can skip all of the serial killer chapters and, except for the one at the end, and still be able to kind of follow the book, because, you sort of understand the mystery and what the characters are going through. And from the detective standpoint, everything he knows. And so I think she started off doing that. And then, once she started to read, 1 or 2 serial killer chapters, she realized, it maybe wasn't as bad as she thought. And then she ended up reading the whole thing. But yeah, there's definitely a little bit of a, tendency not to get that cringe factor.
Derik, I'd be doing our listeners a disservice if I didn't tap into this question. What is the story with this angry cat that won't stop biting you?
I think it's a love-hate relationship. It's one of these things. I grew up with cats, and they were always so friendly and just but this cat's very particular about where she wants to, when she wants you to pet her or not. And sometimes you don't pet her correctly. So she'll give you a bit of a warning bite here and there as needed.
Well, I'm hopefully imagining that a cat doesn't become a killer in a future book of yours. But Derik, this has been awesome. The Art of Dying, obviously all the great contents you have there. We'll put all the links on your episode page here. And thanks so much for being a guest on Authors That Thrive.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Authors That Thrive, brought to you by Bedside Reading. To learn more about today's guest, head on over to bedsidereading.com. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts, or follow us everywhere on social media at Bedside Reading.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Check us out on the web at thriveloud.com and follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook at Thrive Loud. And check us out on the Good Pods app at Thrive Loud, where you can follow, listen, and connect directly to Lou and all of the Thrive Loud episodes. Thanks for listening.